we should. Now it's time to say a pledge of allegiance.
Yeah. Let me go ahead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Patrick, roll call.
Sure thing. Aleppo.
Present.
Avalon. Bell Acres. Bellevue. Van Aven.
Here.
Edgeworth.
Here.
Hemsworth. Glen Osborne.
Here.
Glenfield.
Here.
Hayesville.
Here.
Leet.
Here.
Leetsdale. Sewickley.
Here.
Sewickley Heights. And that's a quorum.
Okay.
How about Killbuck?
Oh, Killbuck. Wow.
Oh.
Daryl, how did I miss Killbuck?
It's the alphabet. It should be right in there.
After Hayesville, yeah.
Daryl, I apologize. Killbuck's here. So not only do we have a quorum, we have 10. So
Oh,
it's
great,
good.
great. Okay, we're gonna take, right now, our guests tonight are Valerie Gatos. Is Emily Kincaid online also?
I was gonna say, why don't you continue with your meeting until Representative Kincaid can jump on? So I think she's gonna jump on momentarily.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the January 17th, 2024 meeting minutes. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Online, raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of the January financial reports and unpaid bills and payroll summary. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Patrick, anything you want to point out first?
Just really one thing. So the Pennsylvania Resources Council is going to be working with us to put on another hard to recycle event. It's something we didn't have last year, but we had probably for 5 or 6 years prior to that in a row. So part of the agreement is we are taking on financial responsibility of the event, utilizing our recycling fund. This is something that the board approved back last year, but it's just time to pay the piper, if you will, at this time. So it was a invoice for $9,000. That is in the bills payable here. And I also did the transfer from our recycling fund to our general fund, so we won't fall backwards in that front. So just to see how much transfer from that savings account we've built up over the years with our recycling performance grants. It's something that has been at the Quakerville High School in the past in Leetsdale. It's something that we're also looking to move potentially over to the industrial park. So
Which one?
Leetsdale, Buncher. So Chief Rabel and I are meeting with the owners of the industrial park tomorrow to go over, something they're willing to do. The event's just grown over the years. We had 600 attendees, not last year, but the year before the last time we had it.
What is this event?
The hard to recycle event where people can drop off like TVs, computer monitors, tires, things like that.
Hard to get rid of.
Yeah, it's hard to get rid of events, but it should be called. But the high school, maybe the event's outgrown that location.
Yeah.
So we're looking to see if that's a fit. If they're willing and able at the industrial park to do it, we'll move it there. If they're not, we can fall back on the high school. It's already given us permission to do that. So
Okay.
once those details are finalized, we should have the illustrations and promotional materials provided by PRC, and you guys will have that first. And we can just start promoting the event. It is a registration event where you can't participate unless you register. And people actually pay the fees for their TVs, tires, and whatever else they're recycling before they show up. So it speeds the process up, try to avoid those traffic jams and backups. Other than that, business as usual with our financial reports. But yeah, you just might have noticed that the larger than usual bill for that $9,000 for the event.
Any other discussion of the finances? Okay, hearing or seeing no one. I'll take since we already have a motion on the table, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Bills are paid. On to the president's report. I am so happy to have Valerie Gatos and Emily Kincaid here to talk about the slide bill. We certainly have had in the month of January a lot of rain, and over in Moon Township, there was a huge landslide, and we live on a hilly area with red mud clay. We're gonna have landslides. I think this is so important, and I have said before, in Glen Osborne, we did have a young family that bought a house on Glen Mitchell Road. It had stood there for maybe 75 years when they bought it. It needed some fixing up. And 6 months after they bought it, a landslide, the dirt came right through their kitchen onto their living room, totally destroying their house. They had to go bankrupt because, of course, there was no insurance. They lost all their furniture. They had a baby, and moved out of Glen Osborne. And that house sat vacant because the bank didn't want to do anything, couldn't sell it because of the landslide. So Glen Osborne eventually went in, and it's now green with logs and trees on it. But that lot is useless. I mean, not useless per se, but can no longer be built upon. So I think after watching that, I keep thinking, for years, I thought about the poor family that was starting and lost everything. So I think this is a very important bill. We live in an area where there are landslides, and not only here, but a lot of Pennsylvania is landslide prone. It's a beautiful area, but landslides do happen. Also, I was encouraged, well, maybe you're going to talk about the emergency meeting that was held. There was a train accident today in Pennsylvania, Norfolk Southern. Nothing, no burning, nothing happened like East Palestine, but you have trains, you have railroads that go right through our communities. And I think it's only a matter of time, truthfully. And as a person who's been on council for a long time, if it should happen, we do have emergency managers in our community, but we're all volunteers. And if something happens, we or they may not be there. And not only that, where did they go? How many people we have in Glen Osborne? 60 people that live between the river and the tracks. And where did they go?
You know, Mayor Carey, if I can jump in on that one before we get to the landslide stuff, that was the newspaper reporter called me about the boat launch that we got funding for in Leetsdale. And when we chatted about it, I said, this is number one public safety, because he wanted to know, like, what supporting a boat launch, thinking it's all recreational. And I said, look, this is an escape, out of these communities that are on the other side of the tracks. And that this is absolutely essential public safety. It's not just simply, for recreation. And it was interesting because he didn't really think of it that way. And I said, yes, we are concerned about all of our communities along the river there for the very same reason. And I did share with Michael DiVittorio, as we discussed in the last Glen Osborne meeting, that this is of serious concern for us in Glenfield, Hayesville, and Glen Osborne. With these areas being trapped behind with one access going in. We recognize that it's a problem, and I don't know when Norfolk Southern is going to address this, but I know that you've been battling this for years.
I have. I've been battling that intersection also for years. Glen Osborne, we went back and looked at how many studies we've had of the Hayesville intersection that we have supported and paid for, that were on the fence and nothing done. I think the last one was 10 to 15 years ago, but there's 4 that Glen Osborne has paid for, and it sits there. I know you have to do a study. I realize that, but it's a shame that after all that time, everybody recognizes that's a dangerous intersection and nothing is done.
It's very
So-
complicated.
It is.
So let me also switch gears then to the landslide, if I may. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned the landslide, and I guess the first thing to preface is that there is no such thing as landslide insurance. Standard insurance does not cover earth movement. There is something called difference in conditions type of insurance, but it's extremely costly and very specific and very difficult to find. So just to reiterate, there is no such thing as landslide insurance. And that's what makes this whole issue problematic. So when Representative Kincaid and I got elected in 2019, we got sworn in, and this is a big problem in Representative Kincaid's district as well. So Representative Kincaid had a house that went right down the hill as well. And we started talking about this on the back of the floor, saying that something needs to get done. And kudos to Representative Kincaid. She wanted to come up with, this landslide insurance fund. I said, hey, wait a minute, instead of getting a new fund, let's look at what currently exists. And we found something called the Mine Subsidence Fund. And it is an insurance fund that provides for mine subsidence. And we said, let's add landslide insurance. So this has been true teamwork with the both of us to try to do what's best for our constituents. And so Representative Kincaid and I are co-prime sponsors of this bill. I'll turn this over to Representative Kincaid. I know that we've been, so we'll tag team it a little bit here, that she's been working with DEP directly, and primarily because it's, she's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. The administration right now, who's the head of DEP, is a Democrat. So we're trying to use all of our forces together to reach out to both sides of the aisle. So Representative Kincaid, if you want to take it from here, and then we'll go back and ask and answer questions.
Yeah, and to Rep. Gatos's point, yeah, I introduced a landslide insurance bill in 2021, and she reached out to me and was like, how do we get this moving? And I was like, the reality is, to get this moving, I have to be a Republican, because it's the Republican majority. But we were talking more about, how do we make this make the most sense? And so, yeah, talking about let's just add it to a program that already exists. Let's, 60 years ago, our state recognized that, that land movement was costly and that no commercial insurance was stepping up to address it when it came to mine subsidence, and so through no fault of their own, land property owners, homeowners were being impacted by mine subsidence. And so we we're like, look, we already have an insurance program that exists that deals with land movement through no fault of the property owner's fault, and so we've done this before, and it is the only insurance program of its kind in the country. A lot of states that have tried to do landslide insurance have passed bills that have required commercial insurance to cover landslides, and places like California, where we're actually seeing that rather than partake in that program, these insurance companies are actually just entirely leaving the market. So it's, this is a solution because it is government run. And, this is like Rep. Gatos always says, this is what government should be doing. And so we came together and we introduced a new version of this bill with Rep. Gatos as the prime sponsor in October of 2022, and then the majority in the House flipped, so we went back to being the prime sponsor, because this is truly, it's bipartisanship. It is literally just trying to govern. It is just trying to solve a problem that exists in the most efficient way possible. So I've been working with DEP because fundamentally the entity that is standing in the way of getting this bill moving is DEP, and DEP does not want to necessarily do this because they have run the mine subsidence insurance program for the last 60 years. And when we proposed this, they basically kept coming up with reasons that they couldn't possibly do it. That ultimately boiled down to it might be hard and we don't like change. So it's been an ongoing process. So we just put together an amendment to our bill that we're hopeful will address DEP's concerns in a way that will get them out of the way of this bill, because the chair of the committee is willing to run it as long as DEP is not opposed to it. And so it's really DEP that's been holding up this process. So we've got the leader's office that's involved in this. We've got the governor's office,
So what we essentially learned is that it's not Republicans or Democrats holding up the bill; it's bureaucracy that's holding it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else is new?
Yeah. So we're hoping, and we're waiting right now to hear back from DEP about whether or not they're actually going to be okay with this. And I'm hopeful that they're at least going to get to a place where they're just like, we're not opposed to it. It's fine. And that we can actually move this, because we have support in the Senate that I think we're going to be able to get, things moving on that front. We have both Senator Costa and Senator Robinson who are supportive of this bill, which I think is going to help us to get it through the Senate. Hopefully this does not get caught up in sort of the politics of politics, that, this is just look, this is a common sense governing thing that we can just, work on.
What we're proposing is that it would put 2.5 million from the general fund into this fund. Okay, so then it would provide a grant program, a revolving loan program, and insurance. So it'll be kind of all of the above. And we recognize that it not only affects homeowners, but it affects municipalities. So, and oftentimes municipalities are the ones who are left to kind of clean up some of these landslides. And at this point, nobody has the money to do that. And particularly with small boroughs and municipalities, particularly here in Quaker Valley, nobody in your budgets have the amount of money that are required. It'd be very difficult to take such a big hit, as you've all have learned in the past. It's huge. And they're finding that with Moon Township as well. Right now, it's kind of funny to watch both sides of the PennDOT and the HOA and the municipality. All, when I go to every single different meeting, everyone says, "Oh, no, the state's going to pay for it." Okay, well, the state's going to fix it, but they're going to send you guys a bill because they're going to determine who's at fault and who's at responsibility. But PennDOT has the responsibility to get that debris off the road and get their roads running again. And they are going to shore up the hillside and Moon. But again, they've determined that they're going to reach out to the HOA. And of course, then the HOA has applied to PEMA, I believe. And so the question is PEMA have any capability of helping? Perhaps, but we all know that the cost of these things are pretty huge. Even if PEMA does step in and help them, it still does not solve the problem. And I think, Mayor Carrier, you pointed out in one of the previous, when we had our roundtable, that what's important for local municipalities is to really look at their zoning, because prevention is really the key here in looking at some of these slopes. And when you look at, you can't see on this map, but this is a black and white map, but this is Western Pennsylvania, and the dark spot is where everyone is prone to landslides. And that's exactly where we are. And so mitigation is one thing. Prevention is a whole nother thing.
Mhm. And the legislation actually does provide for, if municipalities come up with a mitigation plan, that residents of those municipalities would actually qualify for discounted rates on their insurance. So so it's an incentive for municipalities to actually look at development in their area to actually decide, how are we going to do these things? How do we prevent landslides from actually occurring, in order to help the residents to be able to afford that kind of stuff. And the reality of this is, so part of the thing that DEP was really concerned about was they couldn't, they weren't sure how much they could really insure landslides for, because landslides are expensive to fix. And what we kept saying was like, look, there's no obligation in the bill that says that the landslide insurance has to cover the whole cost of a landslide. What we're hoping to provide, at least sort of at the outset of this program, is a way for people to not go bankrupt, to get out from under a mortgage, to be able to find housing again a little bit more quickly, to kind of restart their lives without having to be just financially devastated by a landslide. So this is not, I just want to be clear that this is not going to be something that is going to be an end all be all fix of landslides. What part of this amendment that we're working on does is actually set a cap for the landslide insurance at $150,000 to begin with, because that's the level at which mine subsidence insurance is set. So the coverage for mine subsidence insurance is $150,000. So we set the coverage for landslide insurance to be $150,000 as well. But there is a provision in there that says that the board will periodically reassess that number to see if it is sufficient, with the hopes that as this becomes a more stable program, between our sort of one-time infusion money and the premiums that are being paid, that maybe we'll be able to actually increase the coverage amount for landslides. But yeah, so the goal of this is really to help people, help property owners, homeowners, to be able to restart if they lose their homes, if their homes are damaged, or if their homes lose value, which is what the folks in Moon Township are really facing, which is their actual houses were not impacted, but because of the landslide, the ability to sell those houses or live in those houses has been impacted. And so we wanted to make sure that folks could actually have access to these funds, even if their actual structures of their houses are not directly impacted, but that they lose value or they lose use of the property.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm Julie Barnes from Sewickley. Nice to meet you. My question, and maybe this is kind of a foolish question, but I'm not clear about whether this program, I understand it's an insurance program, so people are opting in before something happens, right? It's like, so people have to be worried about this to begin with. I'm not sure how many people are aware of how slippery the slopes are here. Because we have people in Sewickley that are trying to build on like really steep grades. They think they're going to get a beautiful view of the Sewickley Bridge. And the neighbors who've been, living nearby for 50, 60 years are like, we've seen houses slide down this hill over this past 60 years. And these new people who just are, wanting to develop don't know, I think, or just not aware of the risk. So how would you like socialize this with residents so that you could get enough people to fund it? Because it's like people may not be thinking about this until after it's happened to them.
Yeah, so that is in one aspect that's the mitigation aspect of the municipalities to say, if you guys take steps to say, like, look, let's zone this so you can't build these houses in this area because it is prone to landslides, or that if you build in this area, you are there's sort of a deed covenant to say you have to purchase landslide insurance.
Okay, okay.
It's one thing that when in having a conversation with like the Pittsburgh Land Bank, they're holding on to a lot of properties right now that they don't want to sell because they're prone to landslides. And they don't know that anybody's going to take them, seriously. But if they could put in the deed, like a covenant that says, as long as you own this property, you have to maintain landslide insurance. That's something that they can then turn those properties over. So that's sort of one aspect of it, is that there's the mitigation plans and the requirement of it. The second aspect is that there's a provision within the bill, the legislation, that directs the board and DEP, as part of their responsibilities in running this program, is to actually reach out to people that live in areas that are prone to landslides, to alert them about the program and say, hey, you live in an area that's landslide prone, so we recommend that you buy this landslide insurance in order to prevent that. So, and the third aspect of it is that for the folks who don't have landslide insurance right now because it doesn't exist, and who maybe in the future have not purchased landslide insurance but end up getting impacted by landslides, that the low cost loans and grants that may be available from this fund would hopefully help to cover that, so that you could apply. You're like, look, I didn't have landslide insurance because the landslide that impacted my property happened before this program existed, but I've been impacted by this, and so I'm applying for this low cost loan to be able to address the damage to my property, and in that way it also sort of feeds into the fund. So there's an initial payout, but it gets paid back with interest that then hopefully will help other people to address the landslides on their properties.
Couldn't you not, as a municipality, say that this area is red mud clay, for example, and is prone to landslides? I mean, I don't know whether, like you do for flood insurance, this is an area where if you're going to build here, you have to have flood insurance. And that comes from the government, does it not? That determines the floodplain. So I'm just saying, could not there not be
have
parameters that, yeah.
Well, DEP, I mean, they do have a map, and there are several maps. In fact, Allegheny County has a landslide office that has additional maps that categorize them as landslide. I mean, it's pretty clear.
Yeah,
Map.
and
I
part of the program, part of the program tasked DEP with sort of mapping this. What we did with the amendment was actually shift that responsibility to DCNR, which is the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, because they actually have the capability to do this kind of mapping, and are actually like weirdly very excited about it. So they are thrilled to be able to take this on and actually map this and say these are the areas, these are the properties that are vulnerable to landslides. So that you can then, as municipalities, take that information and say, look, if you're going to build here, then you have to have this kind of insurance. So that's that's a big part of it is that we're gonna, it's gonna include the mapping of these areas to do that. The other thing is, I had a conversation with Senator Fetterman's staff, who's actually really interested in this legislation because they see it as a potential pilot program for a national program. And so they're looking at it as something that could be that they could use like FEMA resources to map some of this territory as well. And Congressman DeLuzio is also after this conversation I had with Fetterman's staff, I reached out to DeLuzio's staff, and he's really excited about it as well and looking forward to working on that. But yeah, so there's a real possibility that we could actually get, if we can get this off the ground, that we could get federal funding to go along with it. Because it could be used as a national model for how to address landslides nationwide through a state-based insurance program.
And it would be nice to somehow help communities know how to zone those areas. I
Yes.
mean, we now have in Glen Osborne and Aleppo, because we both did our zoning recently.
Yeah.
You have to have bore samples to build on this, and it has to be so many feet. And we did if it's something that goes up, flat, up, to measure both slopes, because we found that's what contractors use to build on the buildable slope. They combine the different slopes on their land. So we legislated purposely so that we would not have, because we've had small landslides and sinkholes.
We've had a number.
Yeah. And but it would help communities, especially small communities, if they would also have some guidance. I don't know whether it would come from the state, maybe the MPC, but some guidance as to how to deal with this, even in a zoning situation.
Right, because you're still protecting the rights of the property owners, like you don't want to take away all the rights of the property owners by doing this, and maybe the landslide insurance even makes it harder to zone those areas to not be developable because there's this insurance available, so.
Right.
Then
Well,
you're still dealing with the downside,
The other aspect of this that I think, sort of counters that is that we had been thinking about is like, look, there have been a number of landslides that have been caused by people just developing in really irresponsible ways. And this landslide insurance does not cover landslides that are caused by negligence on the part of development. So even if you buy landslide insurance, if you develop sort of knowingly there's a likelihood of a landslide, or you do it in a way that you were not preparing for a landslide, that you then risk it not actually getting covered, even if you buy landslide insurance. So we're sort of hoping that a little bit of a carrot and a stick, that within this, to say, if you can build here, but you have to build responsibly. If you have to do it in a way that is most likely not going to actually cause a landslide. But I also think it gives municipalities some cover to say, you can't develop this land, because we have a responsibility to a mitigation plan that allows our residents to have a lower premium with this insurance, because they're all vulnerable. And so we are saying that you can't develop here, because there is no way that you can responsibly develop this area without the risk of a landslide as the result of development, and not through sort of no fault of your own.
Perfect. Any other questions on Zoom or in person for the representative of the legislation?
This is Joel with Glenfield. Did I hear correctly? It's like $150,000 worth of coverage, or are there different amounts available for coverage? I'm just thinking of the housing prices in Moon, and I don't recall the last time I saw a house for sale in Moon for under 150.
So that's the
Minimum.
starting amount. That's where that's where we sort of set it, because that is what is available through mine subsidence insurance is $150,000 right now. But again, we've given the board the flexibility to say to go back and actually periodically review the coverage and say this is not sufficient to cover it, and now we're gonna increase this amount for that. And we've even though they're drawing from the same fund, there's sort of like a Chinese wall between the mine subsidence insurance fund and the landslide insurance that will allow for, even if mine subsidence insurance stays at $150,000, the landslide insurance could be increased to cover more of that. So it may not necessarily cover the full cost of a house. It may not cover the full cost of the damage caused by a landslide. But what we are hoping that it will do is help people get out from under a mortgage for a house that they can't sell, that it has been destroyed, that is just they're just unable to get any kind of value from.
Yeah.
And restart somewhere else in a different home. So it may not be the ability to buy fully outright a home, but we're hoping that $150,000 will get people to a place where they can get housing somewhere else, and hopefully more locally than if they're trying to rebuild their lives from scratch.
And do you have preliminary numbers on premiums, or what a yearly cost for?
We don't. That is going to be set by the board, and that is going to be determined based on what DCNR, DEP, and the board that oversees this fund determine as sort of the likelihood of need for payout. So that's going to be an actuarial calculation that we did not in any way, shape, or form want to try and put in statute because it's going to change. It's got to be flexible. It's got to be nimble. And so, I'm not going to say it's not going to be expensive, probably starting out. But the goal is that it's going to be affordable over the course of a year for somebody to pay for, that, they're going to be able to afford it, that it's going to be cheaper to buy landslide insurance than to deal with a landslide.
I mean, look, the reality is that, people who live on the coast in South Carolina, the Outer Banks, I mean, they all, some of those cannot, the hurricane insurance is outrageous. Some of those people can't get it. Flood insurance is expensive, but at least it's available. And this is why that this is not even currently available, even if you try, because it's earth movement. And so we are just trying to take the edge off, at least as starters. And so, for example, in the situation in Moon Township, 2 of the houses were told that they should evacuate because of where they sat on the hill. The young gentleman who owns the house, one of the house, he's here on an H-1B visa. His entire savings is put into this house. He works from home. And so if he was currently covered under this landslide insurance, it would certainly be able to maybe even get his equity back out of the house, even though maybe the entire mortgage, the rest of what he owes on the house might go down the tubes, but at least he can get some equity out to put him into an apartment or get another home temporarily till he figures out what to do. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but we needed to get our foot in the door on something that is absolutely essential because we see that it is increasing.
I think it's a great idea, especially for families that have been there for a long time, or when you're buying in Moon for a reason, and you never expect a landslide. How often do you hear about it? From our borough down in Glenfield, most of us live on the river, so we come down here, and before we buy the house, we know if we have a mortgage, we probably have to have flood insurance. We know it's expensive. It's very volatile. we're aware of it before we come here. And if you're moving to really any home in Western PA, you're probably going to be on some kind of hillside, and that could happen to you. But if the premiums were reasonable, it would be something that, would be very beneficial, especially if it covered, if you were able to get more coverage for one. But so in that case, in Moon, do the neighbors under this proposal, would the neighbors be able to submit claims up and down the street saying, hey, we can't resell our house for the same value? At that point, would everybody on that whole street is submitting a claim against it? Is that accurate?
That it's a possibility that because it is written in there that if loss of value in the house, but again, it's something that would be evaluated by the program to say this is sufficient, or like you're too far away for it to actually be something that we think is reasonable. Right now, the mine subsidence insurance costs about $40 a year. And it costs, this is 60 years on. And part of it is because a lot of communities have taken steps to mitigate mine subsidence damage. We've mapped the mines to an extent that we really do know pretty much where all the mines are at this point. So starting out, we kind of expect that mines, or that landslide insurance is going to be on the more expensive end of things. And the goal is, because it's run through the government, we don't have to make a profit here, that it's going to be more affordable, that's the goal. And that's also why we're putting sort of the cap on what the coverage is right now. With the hope that we can expand coverage and decrease the cost for folks as we're doing more work to mitigate landslides and mitigate the damage caused by landslides, so that, it really does, 60 years from now, this becomes sort of like mine subsidence insurance, where we know all of the places that are the most susceptible to this, and we know how to mitigate it, and we know how to help people understand the ways in which they can prevent landslides themselves.
How many dollars per year are claimed on the mine subsidence?
So the average, I don't know how many dollars per year are claimed, but the average claim, the average payout from mine subsidence is about $38,000.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Is there anybody else? I hope it was very educational as always, and very important. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
So thank you for
Thank you.
coming, both of you.
Thank you.
And I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to get this done this year, because we really do have leadership in the House, leadership in the Senate, and even, folks in the governor's office really working on making sure that we can get this across the finish line. There's a lot of people who recognize just how important it is to get this started. And if we can get this program established, we have the ability to make modifications to it as we learn lessons.
Well, thank you. We all are in government, and we understand it takes time.
Yeah,
It moves slowly, so, but thank you for pushing. This is a huge effort to keep going. So
And your
thank you.
input is always welcome. So feedback as we get this bill moving forward. Our doors are open on comments. So please make sure you share that with us.
Last year, we sent a letter of support for the original bill, so if you guys do have that amendment and want to get some letters, I'd be happy to put one together. And we usually distribute those letters to our members. They can just copy and paste pretty much what we put together and put their letterhead on it. So just keep me in the loop, and if you need anything from us, just let us know.
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
We thank you very, very much for those letters too, because fundamentally, every time that Chair Vitale saw me, he's like, HB 589, I get it. And it was a lot. He was inundated with letters from you guys explaining just how important it is, because I, love Chair Vitale. He's a lovely human, but he's from the eastern side of the state in an area that really isn't susceptible to landslides. And because you guys were willing to reach out and we got other stakeholders, other communities to reach out, he really got it. He gets it, and he understands why it is that we need to move this. So there's a lot of pressure on DEP to get to a place where they're getting out of the way.
We'll go for it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Have a good
night.
night.
Okay, next on our agenda is the Route 65 update. Is there one?
Yeah, I just have a couple notes here, and Julie and Barbara, feel free to add to it.
Sure.
So we did meet on February 9th. The Route 65 committee got together on Zoom. Just basically highlighted some of the key stakeholders that are along the corridor, schools, churches, community groups, anything at all that we could really think of, we put together on a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet I hope to turn into an illustrative map over the next couple weeks. The group set to meet again in March, on March 8th. Did you guys want to add anything to that?
The next thing on our agenda is that we're gonna review the document that was made by Michael Baker, so that we're really familiar with it and what the current state of affairs is. And then we're going to invite our attorney to help us start drafting a intergovernmental cooperative agreement.
So we'll be visiting communities and ask communities to say that they are interested, it's needed, and they're willing to sign the agreement.
It's
when it
gonna take
comes.
months for us to do it,
Yeah.
because the way that the schedules are for the meetings, there will be like 4 municipalities having a meeting on the same night.
Yeah.
One in May, one in June.
It'll take us a while.
And
Yeah.
in that vein, every one of our board members here, if you're interested and want to help us with that lifting, we can get you that information. We can meet with you or invite you to a Route 65 committee meeting so that you can take this to your boards when the time comes to just help us cross some of those municipalities off the list.
Because you are a representative
Mhm.
in
Yes,
your
And
community.
we want to identify what the objections are going to be, so that we can address those when we come to the meetings, and then we have
Right.
a better chance of offering information for people who are skeptical.
And we really don't want to side
Right,
councils.
right.
Nothing like coming in with something that nobody has heard about. Even though we've mentioned it, it was
Yeah,
years ago.
Makes for long meetings.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, always a favorite. Okay, anything else? Okay, let's move on to the grant report.
Yeah, so as you see, in your packets, the old 1-page grant report has evolved into a 2-page full report here. So a lot of awards, a lot of projects, that's what we want to see. So, this is going to continue to grow, and some things will fall off the list as the projects close out and new things will pop up. But making good progress. Anytime that you guys have any questions, this report is really for you as delegates, so you can see what's going on in your towns. And if you see the same thing over and over again, it gives you the opportunity to ask me, and maybe, work with your staff, work with your engineers to help get these projects, over the finish line. But I think we're in good shape. Those recent awards that we went over for the gaming money that we received last month, those will be the budgets will be created, and those contracts will be put in place in the coming months, probably by April or May. So that's when you're going to start to see some of those newer projects really start to hit the ground running. But I think and we should really be proud of that. Your towns are going to see a lot of projects take place soon. So really happy to see that.
Well, I made, it's a statement at my recent meeting just about that subject, because those grants were very impressive compared to what I've seen here in my prior 8 years.
Yes,
And I think that everybody was quite surprised. So you got plaudits for setting it up, getting it down, pumping the water through the
well,
channel.
Patrick is eyes on the grant, I'll tell you. He lets us know when things happen and that they're out there.
Yeah. Well, brownie points don't cost anything.
No, I think that's, that's what we want to be, right? We want to be
Right.
an asset to all of our members, so. Really looking forward to seeing some of this project get started.
Those of us in the community are too.
Yeah.
Okay, the executive director's report.
Yeah, so we sort of talked about those grants there. The next thing on the list here, hard to recycle event, we mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, but the date and the time is set. Now the location sort of up in the air like we talked about. But Saturday, July 27th, 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock. The only thing, like I said, the high school, Quaker Valley High School, or the industrial park there in Buncher Park. So that'll be probably determined tomorrow. Once that's figured out, we'll have the pamphlets and illustrations for everyone to really promote the event. Also, as was alluded to during our discussion with Representative Gatos, the letters of support that we put together, I think we're up to 3 or 4 communities now that put those letters of support for River Road and Route 65 to get some funding or resources to just better understand what our possibilities are. And Barbara alluded to, there's been many studies over the years, but times change, things change. We want to make sure that we have everything in our back pocket to go after some of those funds to make that safer for those communities there. So I thank everyone that put the letter together. I think Glen Osborne, Aleppo, Edgeworth, we put one, and anybody else that's willing
Did
and
we
able.
put one? Because we agreed to it at a meeting, but I don't know if it's been sent.
If it was, I just didn't get a copy yet. So I mean, if you did,
Okay,
thank
yeah.
you. You don't have to send a copy. It's to me, it's just a couple have, so that's who I'm aware of. But
Okay,
yeah,
Nice to have Slickly Sunday one.
that's great,
Mhm.
and I think
I'll check with Donna.
yeah, and I think there's some real traction there, and we have some support from the representative, and we'll see where it goes. Last thing, franchise fee agreements. This is something that we've worked with the Cohen Law Group, who really specializes in franchise fee agreements. We've had 3 of our communities sign on to this pact so far. 2, I believe, are considering it at future meetings. More or less, the more that join on, the bigger the discount. There's a cap of 20% off the total fee for Cohen Law Group if 7 or more groups join together here. So I think that typically we've gotten 5 or 6. We'll see if we can get to that 7 number. Again, this doesn't benefit us as an organization, but it benefits our communities that might be, up for their franchise fees for Comcast here. So, if anyone has any questions on that, be happy to put you in touch with Dan Cohen or help you out however I can. But that's basically the report.
Okay. Under new business, we've already had our discussion with Valerie Gatos and Emily Kincaid. So I am going to move to B, which is the approval of the agreement with Case Sabatini to do our annual audit. And he outlined that it's all in our packet, so everybody should be familiar. I'll take a motion to approve the agreement. Is there a second? See, that's what happens when you're here at the table.
What? Well.
You approve in second. I mean, it's hard with the online. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand online.
Aye.
Motion passed. Old business, any old business?
I feel like old
Nothing on my end, nothing on mine.
And I'm not judging that. Okay, concerns by the delegates?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll just go down in alphabetical order here. And Daryl, I promise I'm not gonna skip over this time. All right, Art, what's doing Aleppo?
Kind of quiet on the riverfront, so to speak.
I like it.
The only comment I had to make is that we're certainly being impacted at this time with the virus, which is going around, which is wicked as hell.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we've for the nursing home part of the facility, they do not come out for their dinners. Their dinners are served in their rooms.
Wow.
We want to keep them as quiet as possible. So this is not doesn't have the impact that COVID had, but
Yeah.
if you've talked to anybody who has gotten it, it's wicked.
It's
And
the RSV.
yeah, and there's nothing that they can do for it except time.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay, good to know.
My daughter got it and she said she'd never been that sick in her life.
Oh, wow.
And she was basically unable to do anything for about 4 weeks.
Oh, my.
Oh, my
And she's
goodness.
still hacking. It just doesn't go away.
Good to know.
Other than that, it's fine.
Okay, Art. I hope you've been well.
I have been well, yeah.
All right, Tavia, what's new in Ben Abbott?
We don't have anything this month, I don't think.
Thank you. All right, I think John dropped off, so we're up to Barbara.
Glenn Osborne is floating along as usual. It's doing well and really nothing in particular.
Joel, anything in Glenfield?
No news is good news, I guess.
Or is it usually good news? Amy, anything in Hayesville?
Nope, all quiet here.
And before I forget, I just want to highlight to the group that the emergency, the Tri-Boroughs emergency committee did meet for the first time last week. So this is just like with the Route 65 committee, we sort of built the parameters of what the group wants and the meeting routines, how often they'll meet, when they'll meet, things like that, and some initial goals. But we wanted to keep it brief and just sort of really focus, I think, on one step at a time. Just like with this Route 65 committee, both of these committees are facing some pretty big challenges here, and I think it's really important for us just to tackle everything we can, small steps, baby steps, to eventually get to those ultimate goals. Amy, is there anything you wanted to highlight from that committee's discussion?
No, I think you covered it perfectly, Patrick. It really was a kind of an objective setting and kind of clear laying out of what our next steps were going to be and what we were looking to accomplish both short and long term. So perfect first meeting.
And I think we'll probably add that item to our future agendas. Just brief little,
Yeah.
1 or 2 minute updates. So that'll probably be a change for next month. Daryl, what's new in Killbuck?
Boring as always.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
I think you guys applied for an LGA intern this year, right?
We did. And we're trying to work up, those familiar with Old Dixmont State Hospital, was in Killbuck Township. The only thing left of the hospital is now the cemetery. And the state has turned the cemetery some years back over to the township. And it has 1,300 graves in it with little concrete markers with numbers on them. And that's all that remains of Killbuck, of the Dixmont Hospital. So one of the projects we want to work on is maintaining that cemetery, maybe doing a online database that anybody can search to find their relatives, and then maybe have a project involving our community plus neighboring communities at the end of the summer to maybe do some cleanup in it. It's pretty interesting journey to walk through the woods with those 1,300 gravestones with no names.
Wow.
No, I think it's a worthwhile project, and hoping you guys get picked there. Let's see, Dawn, what's new in Lee?
All quiet.
All right, Julie.
Nothing new I can think of.
All right, anyone that I didn't call, or anyone have any last comments before we break?
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raising your hand.
All right, goodbye.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you
We'll see you
all.
next month.
Have a good one. Thank you.